Good evening and welcome to the NDTV Dialogues, a conversation of ideas. And who better to discuss ideas with than a man of both politics and letters. Two-term MP and prolific author Shashi Tharoor joins us in studio with a young audience. Thanks so much, Dr. Tharoor, on his new book, Why I Am a Hindu. Shashi, an interesting title and interesting timing. Tell us about it. Why?
Well, the title is quite simply that, after years of being trolled by certain kinds of people who accuse me of being anti-Hindu, I said these are people who have no idea my beliefs, my values, my upbringing. Maybe it's time I set the record straight. It's not just that I'm not anti-Hindu, I am a Hindu and I should talk about it. Obviously, why I am a Hindu, the very first sentence of the book says, hey, because I was born one. But then I go in some more depth into the reasoning, the logic and the learnings and teachings that have inspired my Hinduism. Timing. There's no particular reason for timing other than the fact that at one point when I'd finished An Era of Darkness and my publisher kept clamoring for another book, this had been an idea that had been gnawing away at me for some time. And as I said, with all the political discourse about Hinduism in our country getting even worse as we're getting closer to the next elections, I thought it had reached a point where if I was going to give an answer, this was as good a time as any.
But of course, I asked about the timing because it also coincides with what seems to be a Congress transition as well. We've seen a Congress President Rahul Gandhi visiting many temples in Gujarat. Almost a first for him. He visited a temple just now when he went to Amethi, and apparently temples on the schedule in Rajasthan as well. So
why not Karnataka too if you want?
Karnataka as well. So why is the Congress, there are many mutts there of course on the schedule. So why is the Congress, why is Rahul Gandhi, why is Shashi Tharoor, why are other Congress leaders rediscovering their Hindu identity at election time?
We're not rediscovering it. We've always been Hindus in private, but we belong to a certain school of belief that said you don't have to show it in public. Especially in our public life, in our politics, there has been this tradition that religion is your private business. Go ahead and do it. I mean, someone like Mr. Digvijay Singh, for example, who I know respects and follows all the rituals of his faith. He's a very traditional practitioner of his faith, but at the same time publicly has a different political message, and he doesn't bother to show this publicly. This is the kind of thing we've seen in the Congress party throughout. But what has happened as a political consequence of that behavior is that we have unintentionally, as it were, ceded the space completely to those who claim to be the only true Hindus, which in my view they're not. I mean, the kind of Hinduism practiced and extolled by many in the Sangh Parivar is not in any way reflective of the tenets and teachings and precepts and values of Hinduism. And yet they're saying we're the only Hindus, these guys are pseudo-seculars and all this sort of nonsense. Secularism doesn't say that you should be anti-Hindu or anti-any religion. In the Indian context, secularism really just means pluralism. That is, that you respect all faiths, but the government doesn't privilege any one of them. So we as Hindus said, why should we suddenly surrender our Hinduism to others? But let's now just admit publicly what we have been doing privately.
No, but why I'll ask you again on that, Shashi, is because the coincidence that this is all coming around election time may be, again, that the Congress seems to be catching on to what the BJP has been doing, as you said, ceded the space, but they're being as cynical as well in using religion for a certain electoral gain. Also the point that when you say that Congress leaders practice their religion in private, that's fine, but the accusation on why you're called pseudo-secular, as it were, is because the Congress seem to profess certain religions because it appealed to vote banks. So it's a different side of the coin, but it's as bad as what you would call majoritarianism is minoritarianism.
No, I would say, I would beg to differ. First of all, our Hinduism, as it were, let me speak for myself since I've written this book, my Hinduism essentially is one that respects other faiths greatly. You see, Swami Vivekananda really put it best. Way back in 1893 in his famous speech in Chicago to the World Parliament of Religions, where he spoke about Hinduism for an international audience and explained what it was, he said, ours is a faith that has taught the world not just tolerance but acceptance. And I find that incredibly powerful as an idea, because tolerance, which is what everyone says, oh, we must be tolerant, is actually a very patronizing idea, right? Tolerance says, I have the truth, you are in error, but I will magnanimously indulge you in your right to be wrong. Whereas acceptance says, I believe I have the truth, you believe you have the truth, I will respect your truth, please respect my truth. Now that is the kind of Hinduism that Swami Vivekananda preached, and that's a Hinduism in which I was brought up, and most Hindus in this country were brought up. We were never brought up to believe, as unfortunately members the Sanghivadis do, that Hinduism is the best faith and that everyone else should be hit on the head. That's not our belief. On the contrary, Swami Vivekananda explicitly has pointed out that there are so many different paths to the divine, so many different paths to the truth. Our scriptures, we don't even have one single holy book, we have multiple holy books.
But are you
Because
raising the
our idea is
question
always-
on whether the Congress favoured one religion over another?
No, so the Congress's attitude was all religions are equally valid to their believers. So if you wish to follow a different kind of worship from me, it was not my place to judge it. In any case, Hinduism says seek the truth within. Seek within yourself. You're finding your own way of worship, your own way of belief. I respect that. You know, in my own constituency, as a Congress politician now, having won 2 elections, I go to mosques, I go to temples, I go to churches. If there was a synagogue in my constituency, I'd go there too. Because ultimately, it is a way of showing respect for the beliefs of others. It is not by any way being less Hindu to respect a Muslim worshipper at his mosque on Eid. It is a way of saying, I respect you for who you are. It's not my belief.
In fact, let me just open this up to young students as well. Arjun has a question. Go ahead, Arjun. Go ahead.
You covered in your book Why I'm a Hindu that I read the summary. I haven't been through the exact text, but the gist of it is that you delved into more of the origins and the fact-finding truth of Hinduism and not the today's perhaps construed version that is covered. So what I want to ask you is that do you believe that this fundamentalism can corrode our democratic institution to such an extent that it actually becomes unstable? And B, do you believe that, you know, Hindutva is actually overpowering Hinduism as a religion altogether?
So actually, I do both. The first half of the book, more or less, slightly less than half, is, as you said, it's my searching into the Hinduism that I knew, that I grew up with, that I read and understood, and that I was taught. And so it's everything. It's a summary of the faith as I understand it, its practices, including some that I question, some of the doctrines and practice. I'm not a fan of the caste system, so I question that. We've got all of this, and then I go into the doctrine of Hindutva. And I do it by and large in the words of its practitioners and exponents. I'm not there to attack them at this stage, I'm just quoting what they believe. Then I have a section called Taking Back Hinduism, where I actually argue the latter part of your question, that this kind of distortion of Hinduism being advocated by the believers in Hindutva in the name of Hinduism is both a negation of Hinduism and a danger to the body politic and therefore to all Hindus and non-Hindus in our country. So the argument is essentially both an argument about religion and an argument about the practice or interpretation of religion as it impinges upon our political life in this country. So it takes the entire span.
It's interesting almost where the Hindutva is almost becoming a separate religion to Hinduism in a way. Manya has a question as well. Manya, go ahead.
By the way, one could argue that because Savarkar, who's the first man who came up with the concept of Hindutva, said Hindutva is not Hinduism, don't confuse the two.
Exactly.
He said Hinduism is religion, Hindutva is much more, he said, than religion. So it's a different argument.
So Hinduism is considered a secular religion, but the way nowadays it is being practiced, like cow vigilantes, mob lynching, and burning down schools just because students performed a song from Padmavat. So isn't the religion becoming threat not only to other religions but Hinduism itself?
Yeah, I mean,
in fact, there's a line in your book where you say, let sleeping dogmas lie. And you point to the fact also about this whole reinterpretation of history through a Hindutva eye, the dangers of that. Linked to that question, what's going on with Padmavat? Go ahead, Dr.
No,
Tharoor,
so,
on that.
I mean, first of all, on what you're saying, I mean, there's absolutely no question that the Hinduism of the mob lynchers, the people who've actually gone and killed others because of what they're eating or how they're worshipping or the faith they belong to or what they're doing professionally, those are, to my mind, not Hindus at all. I mean, to my mind, they've not even understood the first thing about Hinduism, the basics. We speak about quote-unquote Hindu fundamentalism. Hinduism arguably is a religion without fundamentals because it has such a wide range of choices of ways of worship and ways in which you can seek the divine. But having said that, there are some things that are simply not acceptable. Ahimsa is basic. Satya is basic. You cannot betray Satya and Ahimsa and call yourself a Hindu. But that's what these people are doing. So to my mind, there are some real questions to be asked about their view of Hinduism, which is really not the Hinduism of the faith. It is the Hinduism in the way in which a football hooligan celebrates his team. You know, my team is better than your team. That kind of hooliganism is what these people have reduced our
like
faith
an India
to.
versus Pakistan match in a sense.
Exactly. It's coming down to that, and that certainly is not what a Hindu like me considers to be representative of my faith. So they, to my mind, are actually not at all acceptably Hindu in their behavior. But on Sonia's question about the way in which history is being used, see, part of the problem with the Hindutva brigade, I'm sorry to say, is that their notion is profoundly inferiority complex based. That is, they see Hindus and Hindutvas having been invaded, oppressed, defeated, humiliated for 1,000 years, and from their point of view, this is now a chance to hit back and assert themselves. That's a very un-Hindu way of looking at, first of all, at our history and at the past, but also, as a Hindu, I don't want to be in some sort of oppressed, humiliated, inferior species. I consider myself a belonger to a very self-confident faith, one that has been very resilient throughout history. So many different reform movements have come up. Hinduism has openly embraced them, transformed itself. Buddhism started off as a reform movement in Hinduism. Jainism came that way. Many Hindus embraced Sikhism because they felt that it actually improved in some ways. The whole Bhakti cult in the roughly from the 11th to the 16th centuries completely transformed and revived the faith. So Hinduism has gone through various things. Even in reaction to British colonialism, we found ways of reinventing Hinduism. Why should we see ourselves in this pathetic, humiliated sort of way that the Hindutvadis see, and they want thereafter to reassert themselves against whom? Against the helpless members of their own religion. I think it's pathetic. Condemning Hindu children to ignorance by rewriting history to make Hindu heroes when they lost wars or battles is foolish. Because it just, in fact, promotes ignorance.
Because interestingly, Shashi, because this lynching of Muslims is really a danger, which is something on a completely opposite end of the spectrum in terms of extremism, in terms of how it damages India and our democracy. But there's also moving from that to the actually ridiculous, this whole rewriting of history, that Rana Pratap won the battle of Haldighati, this Padmavat, that KG children are attacked for dancing to a song, Karni Sena is invited to watch the movie. How would you actually look at this kind of range of what it was? First, this new normal, and I do find that even political parties, though of course statements do come out, that there seems to be less of a reaction to this actual horror of people being lynched because of their community. The fact that in Rajasthan a man was beaten to death, a video goes viral, and the man who committed the murder actually gets support.
Well, certainly not from me, and I want to say that, you know.
But is the opposition playing a strong enough role here?
I believe the opposition does, but the question is perhaps the media, in all fairness, is demanding more than is realistically possible for the opposition to do. Certainly we have condemned every single attack by these elements. There's been, going right back, I'm sorry to say, within a month after the victory of the BJP, we had the murder of Mushtaq in Pune, the IT techie, coming out of a mosque. We've had the Muhammad Akhlaq tragedy, this father of an Indian Air Force Havildar, who has been beaten up because they accused him of carrying meat in his bag and having meat in his fridge that they claimed was beef, and it turned out not to be.
And it was seen as some kind of justification if
it
had been beef. Yes, exactly.
Do they have the right to kill him? Then the poor Dalits who were flogged for skinning the carcass of a dead cow. There's so many such cases. The poor boy Junaid who was killed when he had just bought fresh clothes to show his mother for Eid, and he was killed on a train because he was Muslim. These are people who are really scum. They are not worthy of claiming the mantle of Hinduism to justify their evil actions. And certainly we have condemned it from start to finish. And speaking for myself, I will openly stand up to condemn all of those. I have deplored the fact that sadly one of the men who led the mob that killed Akhlaq was given a funeral where an Indian flag was draped on his coffin in the presence of a union minister. Such things, to my mind, are completely unacceptable, and so they should be. In our country, we have to stand up for an inclusive India. The book talks about an inclusive Hinduism, but the political counterpart of that is an inclusive Indianism. I have said in the book, you know, people tell us to say, Garv se kaho ki hum Hindu hain. But what kind of Hindu are you talking about? If it's the kind of Hindu that does those things, I cannot say that with pride. If it's the kind of Hindu who embraces others, shows them respect, and moves forward to the greater glory of this country, yes, of course we can say that. But one can also proudly say, Garv se kaho ki hum Indian hain.
and the ridiculousness of this whole rewriting of history, Rana Pratap, and you pointed at how Prime Minister, that you have talked of, outside role of 200 years, and Prime Minister Modi talks of 1200 years, and the kind of basic difference which lies there.
There is a fundamental difference there, because to my mind, in the way in which the Hindutvavadis have made Muslim Indians, particularly their enemies, it's a denial and a negation of the basic facts of history. Undoubtedly, there were invaders who came, killed, looted, and left. And those invaders are enemies of India and Indians, and we should condemn them. And you can name Ghori and Ghazni and Nadir Shah and Timur, all of those. Their victims, by the way, included Muslim Indians as well as Hindu Indians. But then you cannot, in the same breath, completely include those Muslims who came and stayed, assimilated in the soil, married Hindu women, produced children, contributed to this country, whether it was art, architecture, painting, philosophy, ideas. Some of them may well indeed have looted and killed, as did Hindus at that time. But they spent the proceeds of their loot and their profits on India, on Indian craftsmen, on Indian architects, on Indian jewelers, and sometimes indeed on Indian temples and mosques. The fact is, they helped build our country. They are us. They're part of us.
In the Taj Mahal seen as invaders, not a symbol of Indian culture, and then we have Prime Minister Netanyahu and his wife pose on that bench. So I think some of that contradiction comes out there. But just more questions. Let's go across to Mohit has a question.
Sir, the polarization on the basis of religion during the election is always a part of election campaign. So it's all about Hinduism for the BJP, and the Congress tries to make the Muslim vote bank. So why the religious is always target, sir?
No, I would beg to disagree. The polarization idea, frankly, has come specifically from those who made the very obvious mathematical calculation that since 80% of Indians are Hindus, if you can consolidate a majority of that 80%, you'll win every election. So it was very much a political tactic of one side. I mean, let's face it, in our country, only 15-16% of our population is Muslim. No one is going to win a democratic election on the Muslim vote alone, except in a few districts of our country. So to suggest that the two can be equated is wrong. Yes, the Congress party, the Samajwadi party, the Trinamool Congress, there are many parties who tell the Muslim community, we will protect you. But that's because they have felt beleaguered by those who have made them feel insecure, that other parties have gone to them to say, don't feel insecure, we will be there to ensure that your rights are respected. To my mind, that is a legitimate thing to say to every Indian citizen. As far as I'm concerned, every Hindu, every Muslim, every Christian, every non-believer has the right to be protected in my country. India rests on the principle that all faiths must be respected, but no faith must be privileged. If tomorrow you tell me I am an atheist, I have no faith, will you protect me? I will say yes. Because you have the right to have no faith if you don't want to. That's what our constitution grants us. Why should I privilege a Muslim over a Hindu? I have no reason to do so. But why should I privilege a Hindu over an atheist? I have no reason to do so either. Ours, in that sense, is a truly democratic country where equality of religion also means equality of having no religion if you don't want one.
But Shashi, often in elections, perceptions matter as much as facts. And we've seen that, of course, in elections, not just in 2014, but earlier as well. And this perception that the BJP is a Hindu party and the Congress, the Samajwadi party, are Muslim parties. And this whole kind of now, kind of tug of war to perhaps change that perception. For instance, when you condemn Hindutva politics, what about some very extreme statements made by the MIM or the Owaisi brand of politics? Why is it that we feel that we don't see the same kind of similar condemnation when some of their statements, and we've seen this in the Uttar Pradesh campaign as well, that often Muslim candidates of parties say the most shocking things as well. They ask for the Prime Minister's head, there'll be some other kind of bizarre fatwas issued, but the condemnation from, say, the secular parties isn't there at all.
Well, I think, honestly, I can't speak for every instance. During elections, we're all busy with our own issues, our own constituencies.
But as a politician,
if I'm fighting in Trivandrum, am I going to be aware of what Mr. Owaisi may have said in Hyderabad?
No, but looking at the Muslim League, say specifically in Kerala as well, now this whole controversy with the PFI, so the same playing out in Kerala in a different way.
Muslim League is, in that sense, a secular party, in the sense that though it is the party of a community,
it's a yes, of course,
of the Muslim community, though they always make sure they have one non-Muslim candidate always. The fact still is that they are not a party that uses extreme language, so it's easier for us to work with them. But there are parties, you mentioned the Popular Front of India and its offshoot, the so-called Social Democratic Party of India, and if they say irresponsible extremist things, we do criticize them and condemn them in Kerala. In different states, there are different parties. I can't answer for every single one of them. But let me say, speaking for myself, that I would be equally condemnatory of excessive language from any religious minority. I have, as a pre-political figure, as a writer or public intellectual or whatever you want to call it, I've been equally condemnatory of excesses of all faiths. I certainly spoke up in defense of Salman Rushdie and Taslima Nasreen when they were being condemned by Muslim extremists and threatened as well. Similarly,
by the MIM, which is a political party legitimate with an MP in parliament.
And I've spoken up in favor of Hindu writers who were attacked because of their rationalism or their atheism or their criticisms of Hinduism. I think the point is, ultimately in our country we do need to defend more robustly freedom of speech. What's happened to the political class as a whole is that we've tended to abdicate this to the courts, because the courts don't have to look for votes. Politicians do. And so politicians say, when somebody says we are offended, we go out and appease them until the courts say, well, if they're offended, that's their problem, but your job as the state is to uphold the law. Then you suddenly have the court sanction to do something or not do something. This is a problem, and this is a problem because indeed we have come to a point where every community now will have the ability to put a stranglehold on a political party, and you know, maybe someone like me doesn't have to worry about this because I don't lead a political party, but the leaders of parties will always have to worry about who they're antagonizing with what comment. You speak in favor of freedom of press in one place, you're offending a Muslim voter. You speak in favor of freedom of press somewhere else, you're offending a Rajput voter. So it's easier not to speak in favor of freedom of the press.
I wanted to take that. I want to take, in fact, the whole Padmavati controversy is a microcosm perhaps of what's going wrong, that we actually bizarrely take out an I from the movie title and we think, oh, that's okay. And we have this that comment on how KG children are attacked for doing a Ghumar song. We've got this now that the director has to call a fringe group, the Karni Sena, to actually watch the movie and kind of be a separate censor. But the Congress in Rajasthan is being very, very cautious on commenting on it. In fact, they're kind of staying quiet because they don't want to offend the Rajput vote. There's a hypocrisy right there.
Well, look, I can't comment on the Congress party's decision.
Well, not just in Rajasthan, but with the Congress across the board.
No, I'll tell you why, because, I mean...
No Congress spokesperson is coming on the Padmavati controversy. I'm warning you now before you...
No, I'm not going to speak
because you're not a spokesperson,
I'm just
luckily.
saying, when one set of people have shot themselves in the foot on an issue, why should the other set of people come in the way? So ultimately, in politics, sometimes silence doesn't necessarily imply a substantive position. It implies a tactical position. If the Congress says,
it doesn't imply cowardice.
No. Look, if the Congress, I say if because I am not part of the political decision making in the Rajasthan Congress, but if the Congress is saying, right now the BJP and the Karni Sena are having it out amongst themselves, why get in the way? You know, two sides are firing bullets at each other. You want the bullets to hit you, you stay out. That's a sensible tactical choice. I don't see any problem with that.